Very good. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
okay, got it. Okay, I understand. Oh, that's cool. Very, yeah, it's very interesting. I was listening to the BBC this morning, and they were interviewing a woman in Taiwan, and they have some process in Taiwan where they have a website where people can talk to each other about current issues, and it's a kind of input to legislation and things. And they have some ground rules that kind of drives people to consensus and things. And it sounded quite good. It's probably still up on the website of BBC, so it might be something that interests you. It sounded very interesting to me.
I'll take a look right now while we're talking. It does sound interesting.
Well,
Good.
hello,
Okay.
hello, Ian. Hello, Harvey.
Hello.
Living two gentlemen in media for a while, and you're starting to make some media deals, as I see.
That's right.
So great. Thank you all for getting here. My name is Michael Specjalski from the Geopolitical Spaces. We're gonna have today talk with our main guest. We're gonna be Dr. Harvey Dzodin, and our co-host Ian Snow Carpenter from the Live On Media in New York. So we're gonna have European collaboration with United States, but also with kind of with China, because Mr. Dzodin is halfly living in China and halfly living in Vienna. Is it correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay, so that's why I'm gonna, of course, give you a small introduction for those who don't know Mr. Dzodin. But we're gonna have discussion today on mostly on European-Chinese relations and United States-China relations, because you have a lot of experience your own, but also as a former lawyer and also senior fellow now in the Center for China and Globalization, and also senior consultant in the National Image Communication Research Center of Tsinghua University. But also you were in former times also a lawyer in the Jimmy Carter administration. You also had some
Correct.
experience in the White House, in Department of State. So, and of course, a quite long media career in United States. But now you are living in Vienna, and in Vienna also you have been in the United Nations institutions from some time in the past. So you have a lot of quite experience from media, politicians, of course, your own life experience that I hope you're gonna share with us. So we're gonna start the discussion, and then Ian gonna make some other points. Hopefully we're gonna have some fruitful discussion, not only like a normal interview, but some intellectual exchange of views from different fields. So Dr. Dzodin, you were in Vienna because we met on OSCE conference some time ago regarding human dimension it's not a human dimension implementation meeting, but meetings regarding
protecting. Yeah, it was about protecting journalists in
protecting journalists.
War zones. Exactly, a very interesting and challenging topic.
So could you give us a small introduction? What is your life now? Because now you are halfly in Vienna living, but also what part of your life is now in Vienna, in Europe, and what part of your life is now in China and United States?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. So I've been in Vienna for about a little over 3 years now because of COVID mostly, and I intend to divide my time with my wife in Vienna and in Beijing, and we'll see how that goes. China has changed since we left, and we're looking forward to going back. It seems things are getting back to normal. In Vienna, Vienna is a very interesting city because, it's a cultural city, just like New York. But in New York, things kind of hit you in the face. out there, it's very easy to find information about stuff that's going on. But here in Vienna, you really need to scratch beneath the surface. And this is the first time that I really found that there's too much to do here as well. New York is the same. But here in Vienna, there's a lot to do. And I like to spend my time going to lectures and things at the Diplomatic Academy, at the Central European University, and other universities here. And so there's really a lot of intellectual food for thought around. And you meet interesting people here too. I grew up in a suburb of Detroit called Oak Park, and it's a small suburb and the north of Detroit. And the most famous person from Oak Park is Jeffrey Sachs, the economist. We went to the same high school, and I'd never met him until a few months ago. And I met him at the Diplomatic Academy because a former foreign minister of Serbia was speaking at the Diplomatic Academy, and Jeffrey Sachs was his mentor. So I met Jeffrey, and we have a lot of things in common. And I saw I know he's been traveling, and I saw yesterday he was in China participating in a seminar, and he was talking about the war in Ukraine. He was talking about global public health and things like that. So he's a remarkably energetic person, and he's one of the people that I've met in Vienna. I'm still active in the Chinese media and the English language media, which is challenging for a foreigner because there's lots of red lines. They're all invisible, and you don't know that you stepped on them until after. But I don't think any country is perfect. And I think in the current state of world affairs, we need to build bridges and not blow them up. So that's why I participate actively. And so, yeah, that's a long answer to your question, but sorry.
Yeah, so Vienna, of course, is a European capital of diplomacy, one of the main, and spies. You say like
right.
So you moved to Vienna from Beijing with your wife because of the measures in China regarding the COVID crisis.
Well, I mean, she was actually here. I left Vienna. I mean, I left Beijing for Vienna in February of 2020. She was here for a few months before that. But my wife's Chinese, but she's an Austrian citizen, and so she likes Vienna. I've lived here several times. When I worked for the UN, for the International Narcotics Control Board, and I also came as a tourist, and I've been here a few times before. This is the longest stretch that I've lived here. And COVID, of course, it was for people, no matter where, Warsaw or Beijing or New York or Vienna, it was all very challenging. Now things seem to be getting back to normal, and I hope that that's the case. So normalcy is good.
Yeah, so I'm gonna ask you about the measures that the Chinese government introduced in China. In Poland, there was, and of course in European states, there were this kind of discussion that it's should we introduce some more liberal Scandinavian model or to fight COVID, or the Chinese hardcore lockdown measures. And but in Europe, President Putin basically destroyed the coronavirus because he started the war, and from the media, this coronavirus strategy went like in a minute. So now, from 1 year, we don't hear a lot about coronavirus pandemic. But in China, basically, if you were looking to the Chinese media, but also social media, you can see that those kind of measures are still introduced, and even they had some protests in some Chinese cities regarding this. So could you give like a short explanation? How do you see this situation in China regarding still this lockdown, still these policies that are they used only to fight this pandemic, or there are maybe a pretext for some political things that's happening now in China? Do you have any thoughts about it?
My understanding is that China is quite open now. I talk to lots of people and they're traveling all over. Frankly, I'm jealous because I'm writing a book and I'm tied to my desk, and I wish I could be traveling more like I did before the pandemic. But I think after the beginning of December, the Chinese government had decided to just let it rip. They saw that they weren't able to control the coronavirus anymore. They saw that there were some protests. They also saw that the economy was on life support and it was going to die unless they opened it up. So they made a decision. I think in coronavirus has been challenging for every country to make decisions, and I'm not sure that many countries did it right. But I am sure about one thing, and that is that no matter where people are on the political spectrum, in right, left, or center, it seems to me that the world did not do a very good job with the coronavirus. And we have a lot of lessons to learn from it. And all the scientists say there's just not if, but a matter of time when we're going to have another incident like this in pandemic, that global epidemic of some virus or something or other. There are a lot of viruses that are waiting to jump from animals to humans, and lots of other causes. So I know the Bush administration had a plan for the coronavirus, and I know that Obama had a plan. Uh, from what I know, President Trump didn't follow those plans and just, made their decisions as they went along. I think that the global South kind of got screwed in COVID because the UN's voluntary COVAX, the agency that was supposed to distribute vaccines worldwide, it didn't really work that well. And so I think there's a lot of things that we have to study. And my main message is that no no country has a perfect government that I know of. So there's always trade-offs involved in different governments. But I do know that in this day and age, the nuclear age, and we just had President Putin talking about tactical nuclear weapons being sent to be used by Belarus, perhaps, that in the nuclear age, it's not like it was before. So we can destroy ourselves. And so there's several issues that I think people should be working on, no matter what their political perspective, and they're not working on them. To me, global public health is one. Another one is arms control, and another one is the environment. Because the way we're going with the environment, I don't think we're doing so well. And the report just came out from the UN experts the other day that proves that we're not doing so well. So we're not going to have a livable planet probably unless we don't work together on it. And it doesn't seem like enough efforts are being made, especially by the two most powerful countries and others, to address this issue. And I'm very worried about that. And so I think we have a lot on our plate that we can work on while we argue about other stuff or compete about other stuff. And I hope that a kind of rationality will prevail again and take us back a number of years where we, no matter which side of the political divide we were on, that we could talk about issues and discuss, debate, yell, scream at each other, but keeping the eye on the ball, because the costs are just too high. It seems to me that global public health, this, as I said, it broke down. But also, it seems to me that we're walking right into the Thucydides trap. Thucydides trap is a historical trend identified by a Harvard professor who looked at wars going back to ancient Greece, and the professor saw that more often than not every time, but more often than not, that a rising power threatening an established power would usually result in a war. And what's different now between now and all the other wars is, of course, we have nuclear and chemical and biological weapons. So if there's going to be a nuclear war, it's going to probably end everything. So we can't treat this the way we treated wars before. But it certainly seems to me, with the rhetoric coming out of Washington and Beijing, we're certainly headed in that direction and headed there fast. And I think we need to have a pause and think about where we're going and why. And this really concerns me. And so, because I've been on both sides, I've lived in America and I've seen how the government works, and lived in China and see how things work there. I think we need to say time out and try to talk about existential issues, because I don't think we have an unlimited amount of time. And I think it's why the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, the guys who run the doomsday clock for 75 years, set the clock to 90 seconds to Armageddon in January. It's the closest that it's ever been. And I think they're right to do so. And I think we need to figure out a way to stop this madness, or we're not going to have a world anymore. We're not going to be able to do things like this, like Zooms. We're not going to be here. So I'm really very worried. I'm an optimist by nature, but recently, the last years, I'm quite pessimistic.
Okay, we're gonna jump to Ian in a second, but Ian, please give me one more question, because you answered partly my question that I would like to ask you now, but maybe you can add some thoughts about it, because you said about, of course, the escalation of we had after COVID, after pandemic, 2 years of it, we have the new crisis regarding the war on Ukraine, of course, 1 year from now, even more. And from last 1 month, President Putin said that he's suspending the new START agreement with regarding the strategic arm control. Basically, his stance is not legal from the point of view of this treaty and so on. But in January, United States was accusing Russia that it's not fulfilling this treaty because it's not allowing the inspectors for the facilities in Russian Federation. But of course, we have this kind of a proxy war. Sometimes some people are saying that we have a proxy war between United States and Russia Federation on Ukraine, and we see more and more escalation. So with this withdrawing or suspending the treaty, we like you said, the news that Belarus is going to obtain some nuclear capabilities from Russia Federation. So this is the news from now. So how do you see this from the year perspective? How do you see this? How do you see this war from the Chinese perspective, or your perspective from how they see it? Because of course we had a new kind of a plan from China to de-escalate, but the West is saying that it's only like a play on two pianos with China and Russia, and the good guy and the bad guy, and straight to mislead the West and the United States. Could you have some thoughts about this?
Okay, well, of course it's complicated, and my position and the Chinese position are not the same necessarily. I think that the war does represent an incursion, invasion of a sovereign power, but I know that the former president of Russia, Medvedev, said last week that Ukraine is part of Greater Russia. This doesn't inspire much confidence in where we're headed. I also know that a lot of weapons are being introduced into this fight on both sides. Actually, Russia is getting weapons from places like Iran, and Ukraine is getting weapons from U.S. and its allies, and from including NATO. So what I worry about, quite frankly, is that there'll be some kind of accident. I have a friend who was the American. Uh, uh, he was in the American embassy, and he was the defense attaché, an Air Force general, and we talked about this a lot. And he said that he didn't think a war. This was some years ago, that a war between China and U.S. was inevitable, but it probably wouldn't be started on purpose. It would probably be started by accident, that somebody would come too close to somebody else's aircraft or whatever. And this is what I worry about in Ukraine now, with so many new weapon systems being introduced, including the fighter jets, the MiGs, and the equipment that's coming in, that somebody's going to make a mistake. And because President Putin has talked so much about the use of nuclear weapons, which I think was a taboo before he did that. So he's broken through one or more of the red lines now. So I really worry that he's normalized the potential use of nuclear weapons. And I believe that we need to do something about that. Some people think that there's back channels between US and Russia that are going on. I don't know. I don't frankly see them. But I think we're getting to a point where the war is getting more dangerous. But I do think that Russia has a point, perhaps, about the NATO and its enlargement, but I don't think that it warranted an invasion like this, where so many Russians, so many Ukrainians are dying. It's really terrible to see. I think it's an unnecessary war, and it doesn't look like it to me at this point that it's being addressed. And I think to some extent the Chinese government is a little bit uncomfortable with this war, because I fully expected, I think they fully expected, that it would be over in quite a short time. And I think they were somewhat surprised. And I think they're doing their best to not upset either side, not giving either side too much. I mean, they're giving a lot of comforting words to Russian Federation. They're saying some not so nice things about America, but they haven't broken any of the embargoes or any of the constraints that have been put out there. So I'm still worried about an accident. And the longer the war continues, it means the longer people are going to suffer, and longer that there could be the ultimate accident. I don't see any things momentarily that will make the war stop anytime soon, however.
Okay, Ian, do you have any questions from your side on this stage of a discussion? Put your microphone on.
Harvey, I'm sure you feel the way I do, that we send our best love to former President Jimmy Carter. Yeah, and it's interesting that you worked with the Carter administration. When I was a teenage boy, I wrote a letter to Jimmy Carter and did get an answer back. And also one time I went to a hockey game in Madison Square Gardens, and Cyrus Vance, the Secretary of State in the Carter administration, was in the seat right behind my mother and father and myself. Yeah,
I see.
And I can remember seeing and being in the garden watching the hockey game with him. And then later on, Cyrus Vance's son would become the Manhattan District Attorney. That he was the predecessor to Alvin Bragg.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you also probably got to work with National Security Advisor Brzezinski.
I worked on the domestic side, so I worked with a guy called Stuart Eisenstadt, and with his wife on a White House project, a White House conference on family. So it was very enlightening for me. And I've read all the postings on the Carter Center from people who are sending their recollections about President Carter, and the one that struck me the most was someone who had been a little boy not that long ago, who was lost in the Carter Center, having gone to the bathroom, and he was crying. He came out of the bathroom, and there was President Carter with he said, men in black coats. And President Carter took him by the hand and brought him to where his parents were in the auditorium. And he said he'll never forget that moment, that humanity. So President Carter may not have been our best president. He was a good president, but I think he's our best ex-president, and he's done a lot of great things through Habitat for Humanity, the Carter Center, and so on. And even though he's in hospice care, I hope he lives comfortably for a long time. I've actually written an obituary for him, and I hope it never gets used, but I hope that it won't have to be used for a long time. He's really a good and decent person, and I think we have to send him our wishes for being comfortable. But yeah, a great human being.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so too. Fond memories of President Carter, and never subscribed to the negative comments about him. I thought he was a great president, and a lot of things went beyond the presidency. We got to learn about a peanut farmer, and his love of Willie Nelson,
Right.
the country and Western guitar player who he enjoyed having come to the White House, and his wife, Rosalind. So there were a lot of things that came in addition. I thought that he was a good president, and his attempt to bring Menachem Begin and Yasser Arafat together at Camp David, which is not small.
You're right, absolutely right, Ian. Absolutely right. And also his teaching of Sunday school. We visited a few friends of ours the other day, a couple American husband and Austrian wife, and they had been to one of President Carter's Sunday school lessons in Plains, and they showed me the picture that they had with him. And to know that he taught Sunday school for so many years is really a wonderful thing. So really a genuine human being, and a really a decent person who tried hard to make things work. It was a simpler time, but it also was still a dangerous time back then, because it was during the Cold War.
Right. And
okay, we're gonna shift to other part of our discussion in a minute.
Yeah.
We must rejoin our discussion. So we're gonna see in a minute, and we're gonna move the discussion further. You're
going to give us a new link, right?
Yes.
Okay, fine.
So
all right.
we're gonna discuss about President Biden and how you judge his policy. So we're gonna be in a